This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Tuesday, November 17th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. We begin in East Africa, where Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is refusing international pleas for mediation after Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni met with the nation's foreign minister Monday to press for negotiations to resolve the conflict between the federal government and members of the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The Ethiopian government says this is a limited military action against some members of the TPLF, but the TPLF says this is a war against Tigray. Witnesses say that Ethiopia's Air Force bombed the capital of the northern Tigray region Monday, as the United Nations says the growing conflict has forced more than 25,000 refugees to flee into neighboring Sudan. Residents in Mekele told VOA that the bombing demolished homes and partially damaged student dormitories at St. George's Church, Felege Hiwot School. Tigray Regional President Debretsion Gebremichael told the Reuters news agency that at least 2 civilians had been killed Monday and several others wounded. There has been no independent confirmation of the claims. The death of Ghana's former president, John Rawlings, Thursday sparked mixed reaction across the nation. Stacey Knott has more from Accra.
Jerry John Rawlings leaves a complicated legacy in Ghana of both violence and democracy. While seen as a champion of the poor and a fighter against corruption, rights activists accused him of jailing and killing opponents. Supporters celebrated Rawlings' life at a vigil in Accra Sunday night, held by the party he founded and served twice as Ghana's elected president, the National Democratic Congress, NDC.
Our founder, who has been a legend, and he's still the legend of the centuries to come, his legacy reigns, and we're still going to have him in our memory. NDC, as a party, we are going to celebrate a week long for our departed hero.
Before he was elected, Rawlings orchestrated 2 coups in 1979 and in 1981. But he surprised critics by then transitioning Ghana to democratic elections.
After the 1981 coup, any political scientist, international relations, or any person in this country will tell you categorically that the emergence of Rawlings has more or less or profoundly stopped all coups in Ghana.
Rawlings surprised critics once again by leaving office in 2001. But he continued to hold influence in Ghana. After Rawlings' death at age 73 on November 12, supporters mourned outside his residence in Accra.
He created policies for our children to go to school. He has created employment for our children to get jobs. He has created jobs for farmers, and their jobs were flourishing before he left power. So as I am going to remember him, I will remember him for someone who came to help us with a lot of things.
In announcing Rawlings' death, President Nana Akufo-Addo said a great tree has fallen and Ghana is poorer for this loss. The announcement said flags would fly at half-staff for a week and then the nation would hold a state funeral, though no date has yet been set. Stacey Knott for VOA News, Accra.
South Africa emerged from one of the strictest coronavirus lockdowns in the world to find that organized gangs have stripped power cables from dozens of train stations, crippling an already dilapidated network relied on by millions of South Africans. Sisipo Sikweya reports.
At Soweto's Orlando station, Hloni Doporo waits for a train that may never come.
It has been leading up to this,
When South Africa emerged from one of the world's strictest lockdown 2 months ago, it found that organized and sometimes armed gangs had been busy, stripping power cables out of dozens of stations nationwide for the valuable copper inside. That's left an already crumbling transport network relied on by millions of the working class on its knees. An increasingly unreliable train service has already contributed to a drop in annual train trips threefold over the past decade. And Doporo, who walks to work most days despite the risk of street muggings, says people illegally boarding trains is also part of the problem.
If we actually become more realistic about it, because we were hardly buying tickets as a community.
On a good day, trains on just 7 of Metro Rail's 34 commuter lines make the trip out of Soweto Township to the economic capital, Johannesburg. At the same station where Doporo waits for his train, Charity Mudzai is restocking a shop she says has struggled to survive.
Thieves come here daily to take the cable. They sometimes come carrying guns. They are even digging it up today.
Richard Shellen, an organized crime researcher at the Institute for Security Studies SA, says those responsible are kingpins eyeing the profit they can make amid higher copper prices. Police estimate the cost to the economy is $320 million a year. But Steve Harris, Secretary General of the United National Transport Union, says it's more.
We have never seen the state of our rail in this dire straits that it finds itself in.
And the transport problems also remove a vital piece of President Cyril Ramaphosa's so-called Marshall Plan to revive growth. It hinges on reliable infrastructure to draw in foreign direct investment, which, like the fortunes of South Africa's commuters, has slumped over the past decade.
That was Sisipo Sikweya of Reuters reporting. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected more than 47 million people worldwide and has claimed the lives of more than 1 million. According to the World Health Organization, many people are now suffering from what's being called pandemic fatigue. VOA's Carol Pearson reports.
Throughout the world, people are tired of this pandemic, tired of wearing masks, tired of practicing social distancing, and health workers are tired too.
We're extremely concerned about the mental health impacts on nurses.
Nurses and other health workers stay with the dying when no one else can.
It's just hard to see somebody passing in front of your eyes.
Health workers have been putting in long hours since the beginning of the pandemic, when people cheered their heroics. And now there's another spike. As the pandemic continues, people are having difficulty maintaining safe habits. That's because over time, as we adjust to a threat and stress levels drop, it's natural to let our guard down. But it's important to remember that while we may take a break on safety measures, COVID-19 doesn't. It keeps infecting people at markets, at demonstrations. COVID doesn't care about the cause or political affiliation. The World Health Organization urges global leaders to acknowledge the hardships people are facing. Dr. Ngozi Ezika is the top doctor in the state of Illinois.
I understand how pandemic fatigue is striking everyone. It's real. People are tired of not seeing their families. The way we work, the way we live, the way we play has all changed. And the harsh reality is that the sacrifices we've made and that we continue to make do not have a future expiration date.
Even with a vaccine on the horizon, experts say the only way to fight fatigue is with stamina.
I call it willingness to do uncomfortable things because we value them and deem them worthwhile, and they protect ourselves and those that we care about.
Experts recommend making safety measures like hand washing a habit. People can also reduce the risk while doing the things that make them happy.
Finding a new mask, something that excites you, a new social distancing, activity, finding something novel and new is a way we excite our brains, and it's a way we can overcome fatigue.
Experts say if people are asked to be part of the solution, they'll cooperate more. It's worked to end other pandemics. It can work in this one. And someday the pandemic will end. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
Years of conflict and the threat of al-Qaeda-linked Islamists battling to overthrow the government have left many Somalis dependent on aid. But an application called eShop is changing that dynamic, according to the World Food Programme. Here's Adam Reed.
Muslima Abderrahman has escaped death twice in the past 2 years, when Islamist insurgents carried out suicide bombings on busy streets in the Somali capital, Mogadishu. Fearing for her safety, the mother of 9 can now go online, thanks to a system that the UN's World Food Programme calls humanitarian e-commerce. And for Muslima, it's also a way to protect her health during the global pandemic.
It has become dangerous to go to the shops because we are afraid of catching the coronavirus. We were lucky to get this application. We enjoy online shopping. It also saves time and we get the food we want.
The WFP initiative is part of a global shift from giving out food to cash. Using an app called eShop, Muslima can now compare the prices of staple items like cooking oil and salt with other retailers. That helps her to spend the $60 allowance from the agency at her leisure, freeing up more time for working and childcare. Though WFP launched eShop in 2018, it introduced home delivery in April, the month after COVID-19 hit Somalia. Users of the eShop service have doubled since March, with over 100,000 people across Somalia now using the app.
Adam Reed of Reuters with that report. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, Africa 54's Lino Mudu talks to Mo Ibrahim, founder and chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, who tells us about African governance. Stay with us.
Hi, 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 you just hi, hi, hi. Nina ukani luka buseli, nachimweo kapena ni malaria. When you walk away, I wanna make you my woman. I don't wanna waste no time. I say, all up, my mama. You know I'm wanting you. I say, all up, my mama. Can I be the one for you? Tell me, where did you come from?
Being part of Our Voices is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.
Welcome back to Africa 54. The Mo Ibrahim Foundation just released the 2020 Ibrahim Index of African Governance. The index this year shows that, among other things, governance in Africa has improved over the last decade, with more than 60% of Africa's population in 2019 living in a country where governance has improved since 2010. However, progress has slowed down over the last 5 years. The 2019 African average score for overall governance fell by minus 0.2 points, and this recent decline is triggered by worsening performance in categories such as rights and inclusion and human development. For more insight on the 2020 Ibrahim Index of African Governance, Africa 54, Lino Mudu spoke with Mo Ibrahim, founder and chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation.
What is happening is that after great progress, actually since 2000, the last 20 years, we see progress started to stagnate. And first, the rate of improvement declined. Then we saw stagnation over the last few years. And inevitably now, we see that we are moving backward, actually. We are moving fractionally, not too much, but yet we're moving backward. And that is a reason for concern. And we did raise the alarm, actually, 2 years ago about this issue.
Things are moving backward, according to the report. What are some of the causes?
I think the two main areas where we have seen regression is the area of human rights, participation, and democracy, and also the area of security and rule of law. This is the area we see some regression there, although economically we are moving forward, human development we are moving forward, but the real regression on these two areas has pulled us back. Rule of law, safety, and participation and freedom of people. What surprised me is that for the first time now we have a separate section in the index which reflects the citizens' view. And it is interesting that the citizen view of governance in Africa is negative, is going down in all areas, even in areas where the data shows that some improvement in the delivery of services, whether education, health, etc., or the economic development, where actually things are moving forward, people perceive that is not. That's interesting to see a divergence between the data and perception of citizens.
We talk about best performing countries. What are some common denominators about best performing countries?
Right. We have two categories here. We have the best performing countries and the best improved countries. Best performing countries, the countries that comes as the top of the index. And this is countries like Mauritius, like Cabo Verde, like Botswana. Those guys are doing quite well, and they have been doing well for a while, actually. Where you can see really a well-organized government, you can see peaceful transfer of power, you can see transparency, lack of corruption. Things are moving. Then you see another group of countries which can be down in the index, but they're improving quite fast, what we call the most improved countries. And these countries like Angola, like Cote d'Ivoire, some Rwanda, these countries are improving really quite fast. And the common factor here in this improved, these vastly improved countries, many of them actually big countries coming out of conflicts.
Now, you mentioned Cote d'Ivoire. A country like Cote d'Ivoire is part of the 8 countries that have improved in 4 categories in the index. You mentioned them. Yet it is currently experiencing an electoral crisis due to the president's decision to run for a 3rd term against the constitution.
This is really unforeseen and unfortunate situation, because I interviewed President Ouattara in public during our annual conference in Africa, and he was absolutely clear, and he asserted to me afterwards that he doesn't want to run for the 3rd term. And then he has a problem of his party's candidate, unfortunately, died just before the election. And that put him in a situation he had to run again. I don't think that was the best situation because President Ouattara cemented his economic legacy. He really moved the country and he really did wonderful in the economic front. What he wanted to do was now, or he should do, is to cement his political legacy. That's also important by reaching out to his opponent, because reconciliation did not happen yet. And as long as it did not happen, that is going to undermine the future of the country.
In part 2 of Lino Mudu's interview with Mo Ibrahim, founder and chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, they discuss, among other things, the current political landscape in Africa and the crisis in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with French President Emmanuel Macron in a low-key meeting Monday before heading to Turkey and 5 other countries days after Democrat Joe Biden was named the projected winner of the presidential race. Pompeo's refusal to recognize Biden's victory has raised eyebrows, as VOA's diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is traveling on what is likely to be one of his final tours as the chief U.S. diplomat, heading to France, Turkey, Georgia, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. The trip comes just days after this exchange in the State Department briefing room about Joe Biden being projected as president-elect last Saturday.
Is the State Department currently preparing to engage with the Biden transition team? And if not, at what point does a delay hamper a smooth transition?
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. All right, we're ready. The world is watching what's taking place here. We're going to count all the votes. When the process is complete, there'll be electors selected. There's a process. The Constitution lays it out pretty clearly.
Biden chuckled when he was asked about Pompeo's comments.
Secretary of State Pompeo.
Biden dismissed concerns that President Donald Trump has refused to concede and said he has held congratulatory talks with a number of allied leaders across the world, including the leaders of France, Germany, Australia, and South Korea.
Well, first of all, I'm letting them know that America's back. We're going to be back in the game. It's not American alone.
Another of the leaders Biden spoke with is British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, a close ally of Trump, who was asked if he had any advice for his friend who is refusing to concede.
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I had and have a good relationship with the previous president. I do not resolve from that. It is the duty of all British Prime Ministers to have a good relationship with the White House.
Experts say some in the diplomatic community are perplexed by Pompeo's refusal to acknowledge the election results and start the transition process, and that this trip abroad will not be a victory lap for him.
I think Secretary Pompeo will have somewhat of a lame duck status himself. Most countries and diplomats I've been talking with, they're more interested in talking to the incoming team and not the one that's outgoing.
Biden has pledged to rejoin the Paris Climate Change Accord and the Iran nuclear deal, among other expected major shifts. Cindy Sain, VOA News, Washington.
Joe Biden, projected to become America's 46th president in January, has vowed to stop constructing a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, a centerpiece of President Donald Trump's presidency. VOA's Elizabeth Lee reports.
In the Laredo sector of Texas, agents watch over more than 270 kilometers of the border between the United States and Mexico. Plans are in place to build about 113 kilometers of wall in this area. Laredo Sector Chief Patrol Agent Matthew Hudak says the barrier would help fight criminal groups that smuggle people and contraband into the United States.
when we put wall systems and it takes away that profitability for these criminal organizations, that's money that's not going back into Mexico to supply the weapons, the ammunition that's being used to victimize, our neighbors across the border.
President-elect Joe Biden says he will not tear down wall sections built under President Donald Trump, but makes this promise.
There will not be another foot of wall constructed in my administration.
Customs and Border Protection says 724 kilometers of border wall are on target to be completed by the end of 2020.
President Trump is still the president, will be until January 20th. So until then, we can expect construction on the border wall to continue.
Customs and Border Protection says the majority of contracts have been awarded and construction is underway for approximately 1,188 kilometers of border wall funded to date. When Biden takes office, analysts say he would have options when it comes to contracts not yet completed.
His administration may be looking at terminating contracts that are currently in progress, possibly even places where construction is currently in the works. The government does have a lot of leeway to do this and could generally be done pretty easily, sometimes having to pay a termination fee out to contractors.
President Trump's authority to use much of the money to build a border wall is currently being challenged and awaiting a Supreme Court decision, even though much has been spent already. It may be a moot point under a Biden administration.
I think this is going to be one of those problems that are going to find a solution in the political transition. The Supreme Court's decision will really not matter.
Biden has also made this promise about the government lawsuits against landowners who refuse to give up their land for Trump's wall.
Withdraw the lawsuits. We're out. We're not going to confiscate the land.
Instead of extending walls, Democrats have long favored using technology to detect illegal crossers along the more than 3,000 kilometers that make up America's southern border.
I'm going to make sure that we have border protection, but it's going to be based on making sure that we use high-tech capacity to deal with it.
Chief Patrol Agent Hudak favors a multi-pronged approach to border security that includes a physical barrier. Border wall opponents say it harms ecosystems, making flooding worse and cutting off animal trails, and that Biden should do more than stop wall construction.
I think in some places it may have to be brought down. The damage is just too severe on the environment.
In addition to environmental factors, analysts say Biden will not only have to balance security and humanitarian factors at the border, but also public health concerns brought on by the pandemic. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.